Hi everyone, Tom Bullington here, and it's Everybody Loves Politics. Today we have a great show planned. We have Joanna with us, and Joanna is a former candidate for the Hastings City Council as well as the Democratic candidate for the Minnesota House of Representatives 2 years ago. She is also an employee of the Minnesota Department of Revenue, although her opinions are her own today. And so Joanna, thanks for being with us and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. So I mentioned in the prologue here that you've been a candidate for office twice recently. What gave you the bright idea to run for office?
Well, since I was young, I was always involved in politics, and I always knew I wanted to help people and make a difference. And I really feel that running for office, or at least being engaged in that area, you can really make a difference.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Now I know it didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out, but what was your favorite part of running for office?
I really enjoyed the door knocking and meeting people and really trying to figure out and problem solve ways that we could help them or help their issues, or figure out ways to make Minnesota a better place to live.
Sure.
And just meeting the different folks and being an advocate for them was the best part of running.
Right, right. And I understand now you've recently entered law school.
I have. I always say there's more than one way to make laws.
And to make a difference.
That's correct.
In the community. So definitely law is a way that a lot of people have been involved in politics, get involved in law as well, either before or after they run for office. So
right.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
What was the funniest or the oddest question that you got when you were outdoor knocking?
The oddest or...
Are people asking about national issues and it's like a local election and
right.
things
so
like that? Or?
A lot of the stuff that came up was the national health care.
Mm-hmm. National things like, what do you want to do about Syria or something like that, and you're running for city council.
Or the war in Iraq, or,
right.
And so it'd be a lot of the issues were between state and federal and city, and I think sometimes they get very overlapped, but yet they're very separate. Mm-hmm. And so some things only can the federal government handle, and some things only the state can handle. And I think, so when they would talk about the health care, it was great to hear their opinion, but there was nothing really that I could do when it came from the city election.
Right.
Now the state election you could, because there was the exchange program
sure.
that was being done.
Things. Yeah, great. Anyone yell at you and tell you to go away?
So my first experience actually, when I was running for the House side, my first knock, I went up to the door, and it's kind of sometimes I don't use a list, so I'd go up to every door because I believe as a candidate that you should talk to everybody regardless of what side of the party they're on. Mm-hmm. And the one guy, he was very opinionated about certain issues, and I think I was like, oh, what have I gotten myself into? But after talking to him a little bit, it ended up being that even though we didn't see eye to eye on things, I still was able to listen to his opinion. He heard my opinion out, and I think we came to some mutual agreement. And knowing that, yep, I might not got his vote, but it was still good to hear his side of the point that can, make me look at my issues a little differently.
Right, right. Now, in this district, I know this is a house district that has been represented by Representative McNamara for a number of years. As far as the numbers of registered Republicans and Democrats, is it a fairly evenly split district, or is it one or more of the other, or are there more independents in there? Or?
I think it depends on the turnout. We had a higher turnout, I think, in the 2012 election than we did in the 2014, which isn't uncommon when it's not the presidential election
sure.
year. But I think it's pretty split. You have, as we would walk, we would see a lot of Representative McNamara signs along with Senator Stevens signs. Mm-hmm. So I think this district is unique in that they really vote on the issues and not so much the party. So that was kind of nice to see.
Yeah. Turning to maybe to the state level, gradually getting up to the national level. Governor Dayton looks like he's not going to run again. Any ideas in 3 years or so who might be up there for governor?
Well, it's interesting. It's watching it. You kind of see maybe some of the same candidates that ran previously before Dayton in the 2010 election have been kind of out and about. It could be Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith could be a candidate. Maybe Representative Thiessen,
Okay.
I could see a candidate.
Interesting, interesting. And then also with the Senate, I know Senator Franken was just reelected at the national level. Senator Klobuchar has been, she's putting out a book. You know what happens when you put out a book?
Right.
People think you're running for higher office. Any thought or any just predictions about that, or you think Amy is running for possibly in, it could be 2020 or 2024, but setting herself up possibly, you think? Or
I would like to see her run for office. I think she'd be an excellent presidential candidate. I have no idea, I mean, I'm not sure, but I would like to see her, see her in the race.
Sure, great. Well, I know the state level is one thing, the federal level is quite another. And right now we have a number of folks that I'm sure our viewers know are running for president. We have 17 declared major Republican candidates. I'm sure there's hundreds out there that are unofficial that,
Right.
you know, it's them and, you know, their neighbors are running or something.
Right.
17 official Republicans and I think 5 or so Democrats. Any surprise about who is leading in the national race as far as the Republicans go?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
You know, he surprises me every day, I think. You know, before you kind of just looked at him like, what is he doing? But I mean, he's gotten some momentum. He just turned out the largest crowd in Alabama. You know, and he's talking about some kind of tax plans where he's wanting to get taxed. I think his views aren't quite aligned with the Republican Party, but they don't really ally. He's sounding like an independent, and I think he's getting people motivated again, where politics have kind of been flat for a while. And so I'm kind of shocked, but he seems to be doing well.
It's almost like politics has become, I know I've mentioned earlier on the show, a couple shows ago, that this is almost a reality show type of thing, this election.
Right.
That who's going to say the craziest thing, and you say a crazy thing, and then you go up in the polls.
Right.
Who would know? You know, who would think that?
Right.
And he's not only big in Alabama, where you might expect him to be big, but he's big in New Hampshire as well as Iowa.
And Minnesota.
And Minnesota as well. I haven't heard as much about Minnesota, but it sounds like he's nationally popular, maybe by double digits over the other Republicans.
I mean, talking to a lot of maybe moderates or some Republicans who had voted maybe for Bill Clinton previously, they're a big fan of Donald Trump.
Really? Yeah.
He's something different. Kind of goes back into, he reminds me a lot of Jesse Ventura, where he is, you know, getting people excited about this again, and he's not the same old politician that we see running every 4 years.
Right.
He's different.
And he's not a politician.
And he's not a politician. And he, you know, is funding his own campaigns, so he's not asking for money. He's entertaining to watch, which that's a big boost for people, I think.
And he's a billionaire with a B.
Right.
So, you know, this last election, both Obama and Romney respectively spent $1 billion.
Right.
And wouldn't you love to spend $1 billion and lose like Romney?
That would be tough.
Not his own money, but you know, that would be you'd
tough.
sit there and you go, wow, you know, I spent people spend $1 billion to get me elected and I still lost.
Right.
That's
a lot of money.
How would that feel, right? You know, there's countries that's not even their entire amount of money that they have in their banks.
Right.
You know, and so on the Democratic side, I know we've talked about this a little bit off camera, but Hillary Clinton, still the presumptive nominee, still the favorite to win. But recently here, Vice President Biden thinking about getting in pretty strongly, it sounds like. President Obama has at least not endorsed him, but encouraged him at least a little bit. What do you think about the Vice President getting involved?
I really like Vice President Biden. I like Hillary Clinton as well. I think he, you know, some of the things that you see him in the news for, he's very personable. He, you know, understands, he's caring, but he also says what he means. You look at some of those debates that he has, and he's very outspoken, and he tells you exactly like it is, which is nice to see from a candidate as well.
He strikes me as a very real candidate, just like Donald Trump, for example. Real, whether you think that's good or bad, he is what he is.
Right.
Another candidate, Bernie Sanders, obviously, who is leading some polls in New Hampshire and very close in Iowa and elsewhere. You know, a 73-year-old socialist from Vermont. What do you make of the whole Bernie Sanders phenomenon?
I like Bernie Sanders, and I think he's got a lot of movement too. I just don't think he's going to be able to capture the moderate people that may really vote on some of the issues and not so much of the party side. I think with the whole healthcare, the national healthcare issues, I think that the socialist tied to his name becomes an issue itself.
Right, right, more of a liability. One thing that strikes me also, Joanna, is now that, you know, we're talking about Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, pretty much only the party activists or people like you and me are talking about this right now.
Right.
Or answering the polls.
Right.
You know, someone gets a poll in Iowa, a phone call, oh, I don't know, Donald Trump, you know. That hasn't been following the race except for on the late night comedy shows. When it starts to get into November and December and January, and we're starting to get closer to a vote, you think people are going to, I don't know, wake up to some, not to say I'm anti-Trump or anything, but
I think campaign season is very long, especially when it comes to the presidential election. And so I think until after the nominations, you know, only the real activist people go to the caucuses and do, you know, the nomination process. I think after that process is over, I think then people start looking at the issues.
Right.
The majority of the people do.
Right, and then as the people that are running go through the primary process or the caucus process, they tend to go a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right to get those activists.
Right.
Iowa's a good example of that, a very strong evangelical voting base, a lot of the right to life issues, a lot of the you know, Christian conservative, you know, that whole area of Iowa, very active, gets out and votes. So that's where you have a Mike Huckabee winning a few years back, 8 years ago. And maybe a Barack Obama in 2008 comes out of nowhere to win, gets some momentum. Do you think, just in your opinion, and I'm not sure, maybe you haven't thought about this, but the national, basically who we get as a president comes down to what people in Iowa and New Hampshire think? You think that, I mean, you think that's proper? Iowa needs to be,
you know,
is the first place that we...
You know, I don't know how the history of it plays out. I don't know, you know, the making of it. I really think if you look at our history of how things happen, I think we like to switch things up anyways. And so I think we only can have one party in for so long. So I think whoever wins or loses in Iowa, if it's the time for a new party to come in, as you see in the last, how many years we've had Republican, Democrat
right.
going down, it's the party that'll win.
What's your take on the whole Clinton-Bush legacy? I remember, you know, one of my first elections was 92 with Clinton and Bush, different Clinton, different Bush, and President Clinton ultimately won, obviously. But do you think that now in 2016, next year, another Clinton-Bush matchup, do you think that's good for the country, or?
Depends what party you're in.
Right.
The Bush name sometimes can still bring back not fond memories, I think, of what happened from 2000 to, you know, the 2008 era.
Right. The whole misunderstanding in the 2000 election about how many votes people got and things like that. Right. So that was a doozy of a campaign. Hopefully we don't have that again. Hopefully it's a clear-cut thing. I guess, you know, and we hadn't talked about this before the show, but things like the Electoral College seems to be pretty outmoded. Seems to be where, again, in 2000, Vice President Gore received more votes, at least 1 million more votes than Governor Bush at the time, and Governor Bush became president. Do you think that's fair? Do you think it should be a popular vote nationally?
Well, most, you know, when it comes to the Electoral College, it's only used for the presidential election anyways. And so when we're, it is for who you vote for at home, and it's going to be who, you're voting for those people. They're supposed to represent what you want at home.
Right.
So if you're voting for the people that you want at home, it should be, it should work out the same. Unfortunately, it didn't in that case.
It didn't in that particular case. Yeah.
It shouldn't make that big of a difference.
Any predictions as we move on? Do you think Trump will get the nomination? And if he doesn't, will he run as a third party? He's already indicated he might.
I said I think he'll be on the ballot, whether he's on the ballot as a Republican Party or an independent. I think he'll be on the ballot.
And that, again, reminds me of in 1992 when Ross Perot came out of nowhere, another billionaire candidate, a little bit wacky, and was in the race, and then he was out of the race, and then he's back in the race, and still ended up with 19% of the popular vote in 1992. Do you think, at this early stage, do you think Trump has a chance to win the national election?
I'm not sure. I think, when Ventura and Humphrey and Coleman all went against each other, I would have said Ventura has no chance. It's just not going to happen. And then he won. So I think anything can happen. I never count them out. They're definitely ones that, because as soon as you count them out, that's when they're gonna show you that they can win.
Right.
And so I think I think everybody has a chance at this point. It all depends in the next coming year on what happens.
How can he get away with saying things about women and minorities and immigrants and things like this?
Because he's Donald Trump. And he's a billionaire, and he that's the way he is.
Do you think the media is feeding him, and I guess I would include myself, is feeding all of this frenzy that the more he says that's crazy talk, that we go after, we're at his press conference, he's on Morning Joe this morning, he's here, he's there. And poor George Pataki, who was governor of New York State for 8 years, is polling at 0%. How's that happen? I don't know.
I think a lot is just that he's entertaining. Politics, especially if this early on in the game, people I think are tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. And I think that Donald Trump brings something new to the table, and he's funny to watch, and I think that really attracts people, and I think the media likes it because it's something different. Otherwise, it's kind of the same old campaigns year after year.
Right. Very true. Very true. Well, Joanna, I really appreciate you being on the show today, and good luck with law school.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. We'll be right back. Here's a thought. Now, if you're lucky when you're growing up, you have someone who inspires you as a kid to do something that you like to do. So whether it's football or golf or basketball or being a writer or something like that, it's great to have someone there as a mentor or a parent to inspire you to do that in your career or in your life. And definitely one of the things I am very interested in, and hence we have this show called Everybody Loves Politics, is politics and current events. I've always loved current events. If I go to a party or if I go to some sort of gathering, people are always asking me what I think of Sarah Palin or what I think of Donald Trump or what I think of what's happening in the election. I'm not sure how it happened that way and how I got to be such an expert at these things. I'm actually not an expert, but I'm just interested, and it really, it just turns my crank. So where'd this come from? Where'd this unusual thing come from? Most people hate politics, and that's why the show is called Everybody Loves Politics. It's a little bit of sarcasm. Well, I happen to love politics, and where I got that from is my dad. My dad, Keith Bullington, would have been 88 today on August 27th, 2015. And Dad was always there to, I don't know whether it was good or bad, to read the newspaper with me and watch the news with me every night. I used to think John Chancellor was a member of our family on the NBC Nightly News. I know I'm kind of dating myself there. Dad took me to the 1980 Iowa State Republican Convention. He also took me to the caucuses. We used to live in Des Moines, Iowa, so I would go to the caucuses. And candidates would come and actually speak to the crowd at our high school locally. I saw George W. Bush came to talk about his dad, George H.W. Bush, way back in 1980 when he was running against Ronald Reagan. So these things have always interested me. I've always loved it. Through high school, through college, I've always been the one that people ask what's going on in politics or current events. So here I am doing this show. I've blogged about politics. If you follow me on Facebook or Twitter, certainly you've seen that I enjoy politics and I love it. I tend not to support one party or the other. Some of the discussion I've had here has been a little bit more liberal, but certainly I have more conservative views on some other topics too. So what I'm trying to do with this show is to get more people like you out there in Hastings interested in politics, and bring in some people who I may not personally agree with, and you may not agree with, but I want to at least get some sort of opinions out there and some thoughts out there to let you know what people are thinking, without all of the Donald Trumpisms, without all the crazy talk out there, just to have a rational conversation with people. So thank you, Dad, wherever you are, for getting me involved in politics and interested in current events. And we'll see you next time on Everybody Loves Politics.